And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey folks, I'm Tom Vasel, and welcome to 8 Negative Game Reviews. So I want to explain a little bit real quickly why I'm doing this. These are 8 games that I don't feel like I've played enough to give them a full review, but my enjoyment of the games wasn't enough that I want to put that much more effort into playing them more to do a full review. So you may love these games, and that's perfectly fine. I just want to give my impressions of these games and why I wasn't a big fan of them. There's also people who say, well, you gave the small game a full review and yet these bigger games you didn't. Well, these bigger games require a ton of work to put into them, and again, I didn't want to play them enough, but I wanted to notice them, and other people may play the games and review them later on and may enjoy them more than me. So here we go, 8 games. I'm going to go from them in sort of a random order, but starting off with the smaller ones in a sense and ending with the ones I think that will have the most fans. Again, just my opinions here, but let's jump into this. First, we have Smash City. The reason I didn't want to put a lot more effort into this, the rules were very difficult for me to get through, and this is a really simple game. You have monsters, which are dice, and you're throwing them onto the table, I think, and fighting each other. Sounded like a really fun concept, but it just didn't work at all for us. It felt like we had to stop every time we threw a thing, check the rules. Could this be mattered? I don't know. This is designed by Steve Avery, who was my co-designer on Nothing Personal. And so I have a lot of respect. He does a lot of great stuff. But this particular game just didn't really work for me at all. And, well, that's all I really have to say about that, Smash City. Then we have Castle Dukes. Medieval fun in 3D. It's 1 to 4 players. This is like a dexterity style game where you're building little pillars and putting them on top. You're kind of building a castle. So it's this interesting game where you are taking these various nobles and buildings, and it sounds really cool. The problem with this game is, first of all, it's fiddly, and the dexterity thing overrules everything else. Stuff falls over all the time. You're trying to figure out the proper way to do it. You can't bump the table. And it just feels like there's too many rules for what should be a much simpler, simple little game. So I like the concept of it, I like the art, but overall, it just felt like it was way too much work. It's a pretty hefty box, you get a lot in here, but the amount of interest and excitement didn't overcome the amount of fiddliness and rules and dexterity with it falling over. Dungeon Alliance. Now this game here from Andrew Parks, who has done some really cool thematic games. I was really intrigued with this one. It's sort of a deck building cooperative game, and you can play with or without player versus combat. I haven't done that. From Quixotic Games. This one I've been sitting on for a while. There's a couple problems with this. One, it is extremely fantasy generic. I like fantasy, but I mean this is like the most generic you can get. So there's no gripping story, no interesting thing here. Secondly, it pales with Gloomhaven. It has a lot of similarities to that, and it's so slow. When someone else is taking their turn, I am bored. I am just waiting to go. And so the slowness and the generic setting here, it just doesn't stand out for me at all, and I just didn't find it very fun. Shifting Realms from Craig Van Ness and Jeff Van Ness. This is one I thought sounded really cool because we had a bunch of realms and I thought, oh, they're going to be shifting around. It's more like a shuffling together of realms. You have the, you pick some realms, you put them together. Each realm has some rules. You're putting out worker placement, fighting each other a little bit. There might be a dragon swooping around. The production quality of this game are one problem. Like the cover itself feels like something from the early 90s, and the graphic design overall felt that same way. And it also just felt very, again, even though there were different rules for each of the realms all felt a little generic. Like, here's a dragon, here's some ogres, and I never felt like the theme really came into it. And the actions themselves were like, I'll send some people here. It was a little take daddy in sense, trying to collect resources. Was trying to do a couple things, collect resources, and then fight every once in a while. But the whole thing just kind of meshed together into kind of a meh type feeling. Now, since this game has come out, these guys have put out some other really cool games. So I really am looking forward to seeing more from them. But Shifting Realms, I just found to be meh. Valparaiso is from DLP Games, was just actually published by Stronghold Games, but I played this back at Essen. My problem with Valparaiso is it is the quintessential Euro, right? This is the whole do this, move here, move your courtier here, or citizen here to get points. And when it was done, I just felt so cold from playing this game. I was like, what did I do? Why did I do all this stuff? I moved this from here to collect these resources to get points. And now you can say, well, that's how a lot of these games feel. But many games have something that sets them apart, something that's unique and interesting. Unfortunately, Valparaiso doesn't have that in it, for me at least. And so, again, I wanted to like this one more than I did. The cover looks generic. The board looks generic when you look at the board on the back, and the gameplay feels generic. In one word, if you had to say this game, what is it to me? It's forgettable. Then we have SEAL Team Flicks. Now, I really like flicking games, and so I had really high hopes. This is a cooperative one where you're SEALs on a mission, going in, rescuing hostages, taking out terrorists. It's a cool idea. The problem is that these games are usually not overly complex. Like Catacombs is probably the most complex I play. This one has a rule book where I felt like I was playing Advanced Squad Leader. Really complex rules, line of sight, all kinds of crazy things involved with this. And there's also a gazillion pieces in it. Putting the boards together was a pain in the neck. There was just so much going on in this game that I felt overwhelmed by it, and it's constantly looking up rule after rule after rule. And usually flicking games, the way I want to play them is laughter and cheering after each shot. Here it's kind of like, okay, think, look up some rules. Now, I'm sure the looking up rules goes away after a while, and I'm sure some people will love this combo. I mean, I saw it on the internet. People really like it. But for me, it just was kind of a mismatch. This whole flicking thing did not work with the complexity of the rules. It just felt a bit overwrought for a flicking game. Then we have Dawn of the Peacemakers. Now, this one here in particular is a really well put together quality game. I think the game itself is even a fine game. I'm putting it in the Dice Tower library. I just didn't like it at all. The idea of this just kind of jives against me, because in this you're a group of peacemakers, and you do that by having a battle that you then make everybody fight to kind of a standstill, and then they declare peace. And that theme doesn't make sense to me at all, that you are causing a fight to therefore make peace. In reality, the game is essentially a big puzzle, as you are trying to manipulate the units to equally take each other out. I don't find that fun. I want to be one army stopping another army, or a small group of band of people trying to accomplish some goal. Here you're a small group of people trying to make two armies fight each other to a standstill, which has great components. A lot of people are really going to like it, and I know some people really, again, I have no problem with the theme of stopping a war. I think that's great. It's just that the methodology of stopping the war by inflicting lots of casualties seems odd to me and how this works. Oh, it sure does look pretty though. Dawn of the Peacemakers. And finally, Perdition's Mouth, Abyssal Rift Revised Edition. Now this game is a huge, gigantic dungeon crawl. I have barely dented it. This box is super heavy. It is incredibly complex. The rulebook is not very handy at all. It's not Gloomhaven. Now you can't compare every game to every other game. But this game in particular is constantly making you think, oh, this could have been Gloomhaven. It uses this wheel in the middle, and you're moving around a wheel, and going along that wheel, you pick your actions that you're going to do, to move or attack and cause different things to happen. But the rulebook itself, which I thought was very overwrought, it took me a while just to figure out how to play the game, and it just wasn't that interesting. It uses dark, evil creatures. Great, seen that before. It uses this wheel that you're moving around and, going and doing different actions, and then cards that go on top of those, and the whole thing felt like work. See, Gloomhaven felt like this refreshing, interesting new thing. This game does not fit into that, and it pales beside that. So while I think the game itself is a pretty neat idea, maybe, it just feels like everything in the game is a mishmash of, there's this dark fantasy stuff that we've seen before, There's an overwrought system here where we try to make a dungeon crawl a Euro game, and it's going to be unfavorably compared to Gloomhaven and how it is, and this one is too unpolished for me to want to play it more. And it would take a lot for me to figure out every aspect of this game, which I'm probably not going to do. So that's Perdition's Mouth, Abyssal Rift. And see, folks, that is kind of the whole focus point here. These 8 games, I might have been able to give them a more in-depth thing if I had kept playing them. I just don't really have the time or desire to continue to do so, but I want to give you some impressions of them overall. Some people are really going to love these games. Some people are going to feel, whatever about them. I'm not saying necessarily that they are bad games. Some of them might even be good for others. For me, though, these were 8 bad games that I didn't enjoy. I'm Tom Vasel. I'll see you next time on the Dice Tower.